What is going on, everybody? We are back again today for another No Limits Rapid Fire Live, where we do rapid fire features, rapid fire fun, rapid fire content, and rapid fire coaching. Today, we have an incredible feature with us, and I cannot wait. I'm going to bring him up here in just a second, but I got a chance to meet this individual a few weeks back as I was looking for references for an organization that I was going to be partnering with, which I have partnered with. And Chuck just immediately showed up. He was open. He was real. And I felt that the vibration and frequency that existed between the two of us was absolutely insane. I got a chance to get to know him a little bit in his story. And often when I meet people, I don't do a lot of research on them behind the scenes because I typically don't want to go in jaded or have any kind of opinion. And then when he started walking me through his experience, who he is, the people he's been around, and what his path has looked like, I was blown away. This individual has a humility about him that is just insane, given the people that he's been around and the things he's done and who he is. But the level of emotional intelligence, connection, vulnerability, and just desire to really create sustainable transformation and change in this world for individuals was felt instantaneously. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Chuck in right now. But Chuck is the founder of Climb Leadership International. And he coaches on a whole variety of these things: public speaking, emotional intelligence, executive presence. He coaches leadership development at Columbia University. And again, I'm telling you some of these things just because so many of us tie to that external credibility. But the second you see him, communicate with him, and feel who he is, none of those words really are even needed because he just shows up and he is. So Chuck, I'd love to have you come join us in the show today. And man, I'm so happy that you're here.
Brian, I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is, one, to be able to collaborate with you, but most important, thank you for an incredible warmth introduction. You know, when you and I met, and sometimes when you meet someone, you immediately begin to think, and it's a very small universe, are we brothers from a different mother?
Yeah.
Is there something that binds us in this universe that seems intent on trying to pull things apart? When I meet people like you, it brings to mind a memory, or at least to remind us that often we have to remind ourselves that the things that bring us together are stronger than the things that are always trying to tear us apart. So to have met you and prep for this show, it was just a wonderful experience, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with you here.
Well, thank you very much for all of that. Hey, I think the microphone on your thing is hitting against your collar. So we're getting a bunch of feet. So much better. Yep. Whatever you just did. So okay. I think it's right on your collar. Now I can hear perfectly clear. So we're good to go. We're good. So I gave a little intro on who you are, but for those of you who don't know who you are beyond my intro, can you give a little bit of an intro on who you are, Chuck? Because who you are is incredible.
No, I'd be happy to. First, let me just take a sound check. Are we okay now?
It is better. I think the microphone's still hitting on the collar a little bit.
Let me just I'm going to make a real-time adjustment here. Give me just a second.
Perfect.
Apologies for the radio silence, but hopefully this is okay.
We're good. We're good. Yep. It's not hitting on your collar anymore. Thank you, Chuck.
All right. So no, you're welcome, Brian. And to answer your question, who am I? I am the luckiest man on earth. I am the richest man on earth. I am one of those people that is very blessed to have been surrounded by people who loved me growing up and who inspired me that whatever it is I chose to do in my life, that I was following the example of my parents who died many years ago. But I am the guy who took the lessons from mom and dad and went out and lived my life according to the values that they espoused.
I love that answer. I love how it started. I love the I am statements, the identification, the embodiment of who you are, and also the honoring of your past and your patterns that have gotten you to here. I think that's one of the things that you and I really connected on is I think that both of us in our lives have really applied a lot of effort around extracting the lessons we can from our life.
Yeah.
And then becoming intentional in how we apply them moving forward. And so, you know, you credited your parents for that a second ago, but that's not necessarily just your parents. So can you talk about like where and how that shifted for you to recognize that the lessons we can extract are really what moves us forward?
Yeah, I think there's two dimensions I can bring to that, because one of them I do want to give to my mom and dad. And I grew up, my dad was a professor of linguistics at the United States Military Academy. So my father was born in Brazil of a German father and a British mother, and he spoke many languages. And when it came to language, my father brought language to life in the way that he taught me. And my mother was a concert pianist. So I grew up with the sounds of music, that music as a communication tool. So to my father, the sounds became words, which became sentences, which became paragraphs, which were meant to instruct and to inspire. To my mom, when I heard the music, even though I didn't have any of the talent that she had, there was something about music that moved me as I heard her playing on the piano, music without words. But why is it in the absence of words, I could be moved? And to my father, whose entire profession was the teaching of words, that if you learn Greek and Latin origins, you could probably figure out most of the English language. So I think my foundation led me to people who brought these things to life. Then, by the time I went to college, Brian, and I had a very good college experience at Syracuse University, but I came to find out that many of my classes were cram, exam, and regurgitate. And I said, this isn't making any freaking sense.
Yes.
I'm coming from a mom and dad who taught me the practical applications of what these tools that we're taught do. And then I sat through class and I found out everybody else's college experience wasn't that dissimilar. Why am I not feeling that I can bring this to life? I'm getting the words, but I'm not getting the action. So I think about that as the foundation, that when I decided who I was going to be in the world, how I was going to contribute to it, I had the good fortune of taking the very best of what I learned from people that loved me and taught me this. And then also, I don't want to say the worst. I was able to compare and contrast two styles, one of which I loved and one of which I didn't. And how do I use that as the basis of my contribution? So I use that really as a frame for when I stepped up and took my place in the world, particularly my many years at Bloomberg, where I spent 14 years, half of them as the company's public spokesman. My job was to get on stage and move an audience. How did I do it? I thought about my mom and my dad. How did they bring their subject matter to life? I'm not going to get on stage and do what, unfortunately, no offense to my professors who were very good people, they were very boring. I'll say that with honesty. They were well-intentioned, but they didn't bring the subject matter to life.
Right.
And so that is maybe a long-winded way of saying we take the things along the way in our journey. We take the best of things, we take the worst of things, the peaks, the peak high, the peak low, whatever that may be. And we begin to form our own style and who we choose to be in the world based upon the measures of what we deem are important for all of those events. So that's how I became who I've become.
I love it. And, you know, you said more than one time, either you were moved or you needed to move other people.
Right.
And, you know, we haven't spent a ton of time together, but one of my favorite sayings and one of the things that we believe came from one of my core lessons, which I learned very early, not to get stuck by the things that have happened to me, but instead get moved by what I could do with them.
Right.
And I've learned that through all this time, moved people move people. And so clearly
that's a good point.
you are a moved person, right?
Right.
And you are not only moving other people with your words, but with your energy and with what you're rippling into the world.
Indeed.
You know, what I didn't know about you until further in our conversation, but I do think is really interesting, is I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that everything happens for a reason and everything is there for us should we choose to see what's in it for us.
Yeah.
You were one of, go ahead.
No, I'm with you on that. Keep going.
You were somebody that was supposed to be on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center on 9/11 way back when.
Correct.
And yet you weren't.
It wasn't my day to die, Brian.
Can you talk about that story and where that's led, as well as what were the lessons that you extracted as to the reasons that you were not there?
Yeah, you bet. Just for context, at the time I was in the throes of my career at an organization called Bloomberg. Although he may be a household name to many people, in the event our listeners don't know, Mike Bloomberg is one of the richest men in the world, but that's not who he is. He formed an organization back in the mid 80s that I was fortunate to join when I was the 190th employee. For half of my career, the second part of my 14 years there, I was the company's public spokesman. My job was to get on stage wherever there was an event, to the extent that that the event organizers wanted Bloomberg represented. It was my job to represent the organization. And my job, because I was getting paid by someone my mission was to move people, to get them to think and to plant into their mind why it is they would want to use the Bloomberg service in the first place. Because I did so many speaking engagements, I was fairly well known in the community, and there was a conference at the World Trade Center that day on 9/11 that there were approximately 300 people in attendance. It was an agenda of public speakers like me who were subject matter experts in our field. I was originally 2 months before that event scheduled to speak at 9:30 that morning. A friend of mine named Scott Saber, who was on the agenda for 3 o'clock, called me in the summertime and asked if I would move. And I said, no problem. Can you, Chuck, take the 3 o'clock and I'll take the 9:30? Yeah. That was a very innocent discussion like we do all the time in our day. Little did I know that, unfortunately, my friend Scott spoke at 9:30 and never made it out of the building. And since I was scheduled to speak at 3 o'clock, I was on my way to the building, but I lost 16 friends that were there as I was en route.
Sorry for your loss, brother.
I appreciate that. It's been a long time, but I think it caused to me, and since I was actually appeared on the company's dead list for 4 hours before I was identified as alive, and the other people did not make it they were unfortunately in the building at the collapse. I state that, Brian, though, because it had a massive impact on me. And as I thought about it, as my wife thought I was gone, and my kids and my brothers were looking for me, what happened to Chuck, they all knew I was there. I thought about that for a long time, and I said, there's nothing I can do to bring that day back. No matter what I do, I just cannot let all of this happen in vain. If I can't change the event, there's only one thing, Brian, that I knew I could change, and that's me. And it caused me to go into some introspection and decide, if tomorrow, let's just say, if 9/12 were the last day on Earth, I asked myself, and this is the Steve Jobs 2005 Stanford commencement address, if this was the last day on Earth, is this exactly what I would be doing? Yeah. And ask yourself every day. And if you ask yourself too many days in a row and the answer is no, it's time for a change. So it sparked a massive amount of, okay, what am I going to do about this? Well, I've been telling myself, in spite of the fact that I grew up in a very winter wonderland place, I always thought about climbing a mountain, but always gave myself excuses why. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the expertise. Ridiculous. On 9/11/2002, I stood on the summit of Mount Rainier. A year later, I stood on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. A year later, I climbed the Matterhorn, and then I just kept climbing. But I climbed not for the physical aspect of being a mountaineer. I can teach somebody to climb a rock. I climbed to get in touch with my inner self, to continue to ask and to challenge myself, what am I going to do with this? And ultimately, Brian, what it led to, when I came down the mountain of a mountain in Alaska called Mount Bona, it finally struck me. I am going to dedicate myself in the service of someone else's success. I'm going to become the proverbial mountain guide because of all these wonderful people that led me up these incredible mountains that never in a million years could I have climbed myself. Their generosity, their intellect, their mental and physical embrace of the people who were not as skilled as them. They, Brian, were my mom and dad at the time. Yeah. They brought mountaineering to life. They served me and the people on my team. What am I going to do about it? This is a no-brainer. I'm going to be the mountain guide, but my expertise are communication skills and emotional intelligence. So all of that sparked Climb Leadership Teaching at Columbia, just the confluence of all of these events to shape who I became and who I continue to be.
What I also really appreciate about that is I love how clear and vivid you are in dedicating your life to the service of someone else's success.
Indeed.
And what's interesting
is there a higher calling, Ryan, other than the doctor?
I don't think there is, but I also think that there's a lot of people who say that, and we don't necessarily believe it.
Right.
You are one of the outliers that has such humility and such grace in the favor of others that when you say that, it's not just a belief. To your whole point on vibration and how we feel things, I feel that that is what you're doing. And you've not only done that metaphorically, you are literally doing that, and you are helping other people now learn the importance of climbing mountains and using not just the analogy that's tied to it, but the physical experience and representation of what that climb can look like and what it does for us, bringing down our walls and our armor and getting us vulnerable to see the transformation. And so I love that you're using the modality that not only saved your path, which has now also been the fuel for amplifying other people's success, but that you're now just deploying that in a really experiential way for people to learn and grow. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and some of the things that have come from that? Because I know there's some phenomenal projects tied to it.
Indeed, but I think the first foundationally, when I think about, when I left the Wall Street world, I actually didn't leave it. I became an executive coach to many Wall Street firms, and I did it 8 years ago. But I first had to think about, I'm now chief cook and bottle washer of my company, like all entrepreneurs. All right, I'm by myself. What am I going to do? What's it going to be called? How am I going to do it? I figured the first thing that I could do, I needed to lay down my teaching principles. And I'm now becoming a teacher. I guess I always was. I never quite saw myself that way, but what the heck? I said, all right, what am I going to do? I wrote a book called A Climb to the Top. And I use mountaineering as a metaphor for how to climb a mountain. But the toolkit is not crampons and ice axes. The toolkit are these communication devices that you and I are doing right now. We're doing it in real time. So I developed a framework called the 10 Commandments of Great Communicators. And I did that because people had been complimenting me for so many years of, wow, you're really good on the stage. How do you do it? And for the longest time, I didn't know. I could not tell you. What is it I do that is moving people? And I was like, So I started to think about it. All right, what do I do? I had a friend video me. I don't like watching myself. And I had my closest friend who is very honest with me because he tells me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And together he sat there with me on the video and he began to say, Chuck, here's what you do. And he started to write it out. And I didn't know that. I was like, oh my God. And he said, Chuck, here's our framework. And his name is Ed. And Ed is my best buddy. And Ed wrote down A, B, C. And he said, what you have here, Chuck, did you have a methodology? Did you know that? Nah, what the hell do I know? I just get up and I am trying to achieve my goal and objective. It's like, well, here we go. So A Climb to the Top was my first ability to codify what is it I have here. I can teach people. And now that I actually have a method, I have a book, it's contained in a framework called 10 Commandments. I can use this. This is a toolkit. So whether you're an auto mechanic or a mountaineer, you rely on tools. Here are the tools. And they may seem abstract, but they're very real because everybody communicates all day. So A Climb to the Top became the foundation. The book became an Amazon bestseller. So now it's really, when the business is taken off, people are hiring me in companies and Wall Street and other places to be able to teach the very thing that they watched me do for many years. So to have the book A Climb to the Top, it only makes sense. And it took me, Brian, when I was working with the publisher, what are you going to call it, Chuck? I'm going to call it A Climb to the Top. And they were expecting that this was going to be a 3-day exercise. We were going to brainstorm on the idea of the book. I said, nah, this is, I was like, hey, that's great. I think we got the book title. How hard was that? Wow, that was really simple. It's just what it is. It's so obvious. It was right in front of me. So my company, Climb Leadership, teaching communication and emotional intelligence to help people become better communicators and more empathetic leaders. A Climb to the Top, 10 Commandments of Great Communicators, a methodology for how to communicate. So from there, what was born was now a brand. It's like, okay, now the businessman in me has to be conscious. How do I want to show the world these things that we do in the service of others? So everything, Brian, it only made sense, came around the climb. Everybody is on their proverbial mountain climb. Everyone needs a guide, including me, because I had wonderful guides that I called mom and dad, my best teachers, my Mike Bloomberg, my mentors, people who had a massive influence in helping me to determine and decide who am I going to be when I step up and take my place in the world. And it's a continuing evolution, but I'm so blessed for all the wonderful people that have been around me and that have helped me to really think about how do I continue to be that best version of myself, but to do so always in the service of others. So I don't know any other way to think about it.
One of my greatest mentors once told me, there is no limit to what one can accomplish as long as they care not who gets the credit.
Oh, that is a really solid point, because if you're thinking about where we're going to divide the credit, you're not thinking about what it is we're going to accomplish. You have diminished your capacity. And I really appreciate that, because even when we're climbing, whether it's a metaphorical or physical climbing, we're not sitting around granting credit. We're just trying to help everybody take a step at a time. We focus on the inputs. And if you focus on the inputs lead you to the outputs. We don't think of the achievement. We don't think of the summit. We think about what's the best thing we can do to take the next step. And I think in careers, it's a good metaphor. What's the next step? Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University, he always talked about the next pass. It's all you got to think about. Don't worry about the basket. Don't worry about the defenders. What are you doing with the ball? So whatever metaphor we decide to apply to it, I think we all think very like-minded. And we're just thinking about this ball's got to go to someone else. When I'm climbing, I'm concerned about the guy behind me and the guy in front of me. The people who go to battle, they're there to protect the man to the right and the man to the left. They're not even protecting themselves. That's not the mentality of a soldier. That's why soldiers are so service-oriented. And I think about that. The man to my right, the man to my left, that's all I got to worry about. Two things. That's it. Climbing. The guy in front of me, the person behind me. That's how we do. We just try to keep it simple.
Yeah, very, very narrow focus. And I appreciate that. You know, you clearly not only exhibit a significant amount of emotional intelligence, and you are a phenomenal communicator. And you credit so much of that to the backdrop and the framing of the people in your life. But you also are somebody who's consistently showing up, trying to improve. And you even said that, right?
Indeed.
And so for somebody who is a sought after world leader that teaches emotional intelligence and communication, either who do you go to, or how are you actively improving your own levels of emotional intelligence and communication real time?
Well, I think it's not that I am conscious of this. It's that I think the best thing that we have available to us is to look outside of ourselves. And if you look at Michael Jordan, Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and I'm using the sports analogy here, Brian, because it's a very visual thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just the achievement, but when you watch Roger Federer evolve through the course of his career, and I'm a tennis fan, so I'll use that one.
I am as well. He's a great man. Yeah.
But even Nadal, Djokovic, or I'll give credit to any great athlete. I like LeBron James and Michael Jordan too, because what do they always talked about? The continual improvement. And I've heard LeBron James say that if I ever think that I'm as good as I can ever get, then I'm done. There's no point in me doing this. And for me, I take inspiration, in this case, from Mike Bloomberg, because I was under the tutelage of an incredible achiever. But Mike did not inspire you to achieve. He inspired us to behave, to collaborate, to never focus on trying to be perfect, but striving for progress. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. He even said to me, screamed at me, Garcia, if you're not making mistakes, you're not working hard enough. And when you get that kind of permission of psychological safety from a guy who figured out how to become a billionaire, there's almost this tacit approval to go out and try and fail and try and fail. What do we have to lose? And I think, Brian, I take it from the people that inspire me to continue to remind myself How am I going to get better? What's my next step? What's my next pass? And then one thing I do want to give credit, not only because I'm an author, I'm an avid reader. I will read a book from anyone that has something that I'm certain can teach me something. I don't care who it is. I don't care what field it is. It doesn't have to be, it could be anything where I can pick up a kernel of information that inspires me, persuades me, provokes me to do something better than I did before.
I love that answer. And again, you just ooze humility through everything, and you give credit in so many different directions. I often say that the day I wake up and I have it all figured out is probably going to be my last day on this planet.
Right. Well, what do you have left to live for?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, honestly, like to me, it's kind of fun and it's gamified and it's how we can continue to learn and grow. You know, you did have a really unique situation that taught you not only a gift, but was a great lesson in your life. And it was happening as early as age 13 for you.
Yeah.
And I'd love it if you could unpack that a little bit, because I do think that's very foundational in your own awareness and intentionality that has clearly been a big driver for you in your humility, your success, and your connection.
I will say, Brian, what I'm about to introduce was probably throughout the course of my life, my best teacher and also my worst memories. To our listeners, I am 5'9". I weigh about 175 pounds. 40 years ago, I was 5'9" and I weighed 175 pounds. 45 years ago, I was 5'5" and I weighed 207 pounds. When I was 13 years old, my father said to me in a car ride one home day, "Chuck, we have to deal with this." And I won't get into the length of my own obesity into the story, but my father guided me along the way that when I was 13 years old, I went from 207 to 155 over the course of several months. I was guided by the hand of a loving father who was honest with me and helped me to understand what I had to deal with, because I was so bullied in school. They called me the fat man, the fat kid, you name it, I heard it. And my own coping mechanism, my defense mechanism is just to laugh it off. But after a while, you begin to think you can only take so much of that.
Yeah.
But I think the best lesson, Brian, it not only turned me into someone who was capable of doing something I never thought I could achieve, because I transformed. I cut myself in half and people didn't recognize me. But here was the most interesting lesson. I began to see the world differently when I got to 155. But I don't know if it was odd or opportunistic. The world saw me differently. To me, I was the same guy that woke up a year ago. But the same people that bullied me were now befriending me. I didn't befriend them back. I wasn't mean to them. I became indifferent to their existence. I came to learn to separate the good guys from the bad guys, because the good guys love you at 207 or at 155 because of who you are, not how you look.
Right.
And so when I think about every night for about 18 months, I went to bed thinking, I'm going to wake up tomorrow 60 pounds heavier. How do I fight that? How do I help? And what's the story that I tell myself? That's not me anymore. But I kept in my old story because I didn't know how to get out of that, because I was so afraid of going back to that place. That was a terrible place to be, but the best lesson I've ever had, because my father guided me with love and compassion, free of judgment. He was there. He was my guide. I was climbing this mountain with a guide that loved me, but was honest. And he looked out for my best interest, but he also gave me plenty of space to go find and to navigate my way, just knowing he was there. Brian, that was my best teacher. And I think when I got into my adult life and I started running marathons and I eat like I'm a paleo guy. I don't eat anything out of a box or a bag. I don't eat wedding cake. My family doesn't give me birthday cake. I don't eat sugar and flour. That's just not in my circle of dignity. So I think for all of us, and what I hope everybody can take from this, think about your life in 3 circles. Your circle of competence. What do you do? What do you do particularly well? Not too many things. Your circle of competence. Second circle, your circle of dignity. What is not negotiable? Everybody has to decide that so that you're not for sale. And then the third, your circle of trust. Who's in it? Many are called. We have 50,000 people, whoever, on LinkedIn and Instagram. Who cares? Who's in my circle of trust? My dad was my first, my mom, my dad, my brothers are my best friends. They're my circle. They're my circle of trust and a few people along the way. When we combine our circle of competence, our circle of dignity, our circle of trust, I hit my bullseye when I was 52. It's like, man, I got it. I know it's not for sale. I know what I do well, and I don't try to go out of the bounds of my competence. I get better at it. I add depth to this thing I'm known to do. I don't need to do a million other things. But the most important, Brian, and I can say on air, I think you're in my circle of trust, and I've only known you for a couple of months. But think about the importance of our circle of trust. Who's in it? This is our life. And you ask, who are you? All you have to do is look into my circle of trust, and I'll tell you who I am. And I look at your circle of trust, Brian. I don't even need to know you. If you showed me your circle of trust, I'll tell you who you are.
Chuck, I really appreciate that. And what you, again, very subtly embedded in two different answers in a row was this perspective of permission that was given to you externally that you didn't believe you had internally.
Exactly. And that's what I do every day because I learned from someone who taught me that valuable lesson. And what do?
Bingo.
We give it back.
And that's what I was going to highlight for you is that you really are a permission giver, right? What's really interesting is I believe that so much suffering exists in this world on the internal side because of the things that are left unsaid, the things we lack permission to feel or say, the things we lack the words to articulate, or the things that are left undone. Largely by what you do, who you are, and how you teach, you are giving people the tools and the modalities to be able to communicate effectively so they can say what needs to be said, have the words to articulate what needs to be done, but you're also empowering them with the emotional intelligence to be able to have and give the permission to themselves to be able to feel and act a certain way that's in congruence with who they are, not the other way around. And so
Are you sure we only met a couple months ago? Because I think you wrote my website about 8 years ago. You spot on, Brian. You have hit the proverbial nail on the head.
Thank you, Chuck. But that's how I see you, right? And I see myself in a similar light, right? So often my purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs.
Right. And I
think that's literally my stated purpose, because what I recognized for so long is the deep embedded shame, the deep embedded anger, the deep embedded elements that I had to unpack and heal through many external events that took place as well, but not allowing myself to, again, either have the emotional intelligence, the communication to be able to effectively move through these things and eliminate my own suffering. Now that we have frameworks and modalities to be able to do that, I'm again in that position where my wins are other people's wins. Indeed. And so I just want to thank you because the humility with which you carry yourself, I would also put you in my circle of trust, though we've only known each other for a few minutes. Really, I mean, in the scheme of life, like we've known each other for a minute. And you just exhibit all of the areas around what human connection is really about, which is allowing people to be safe, allowing people to be protected. You give people the ability to be seen and understood, and through that, you allow them to connect. And so you're a connector and a protector, and you're a permission giver, Chuck. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been with you today.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I just want to leave with one thing. What you're describing is the very foundation of how we go on to exceed our own expectations. Because I think what we do, what you and I do, we help other people to define and then to exceed them, not to meet them. That a lot of people can meet expectations. But what I've come to figure out that so many people want to be able to exceed the expectation, but haven't established the necessary foundation to set them up for that success. So how do you do it? And it starts with that psychological safety, and that's giving them permission to fail, giving them permission to make mistakes without judgment. And I think the educational model, I just want to point that out. I feel like we need to reform that model because many people learn it too late. I think the educational model should give us that kind of permission to learn from those mistakes, not to be punished for what we don't know and promoted what we do, but in fact, learn to navigate the uncertainty and the ambiguity because we're not very good at self-correction. We're very good at making plans and task mastery and doing everything right. But to you, especially for the life that you have lived, your life has been one gigantic series of adaptations. Mm-hmm. We do the same thing on a mountain and career. It's a continual set of adaptations in spite of whatever we plan because we know it's going to go awry in the first day.
That's right.
Thank you, Brian, for the opportunity to be able to collaborate with you here. It's been such a pleasure, and I look forward to collaborating on any other project that we
This
do
is just the
together.
beginning, my friend. So we've got your website down below. Is
see
there
that.
any other best way for people to get in touch with you? Because I want our world to know who you are, brother.
And I appreciate that. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the social media. You can also email me, which I'm on most of the time, which is chuck@climb the mountain, chuck@climbleadership.com, or go to my website, chuckgarcia.com, hit the contact tab, reach out.
Beautiful. And so we've got it down below on the screen. And Chuck, seriously, brother, just the beginning. I cannot wait to see where this goes. And you are somebody that I learn from in every interaction, and how you communicate and how you allow the energy to move through you. Truly, brother, it's a gift.
Well,
and I'm grateful to be receiving it.
I bow to the divine in you. I am very grateful. Thank you to the listeners for their time and attention. I really appreciate that. But Brian, it's been a pleasure. Grateful for the opportunity to contribute to your show.
We'll do it again soon. Okay, brother? We'll talk
You
soon.
bet. Take care.
So for all of you, when we talk about rapid fire feature, that's about 30 minutes of condensed insane amounts of knowledge and wisdom in every category that makes us human. Business, life, relationships, who you are. Chuck Garcia lives it. He is the permission giver in so many ways just because of how he chooses to live his life. And yet he does it in such a humble and clear way, giving credit to all of those that have helped build the foundation for who he is today. This is the lesson. He was the lesson. You are the lesson. The question is, are you pausing long enough to take toll on the lessons that already exist in your life and become intentional with how do you apply them moving forward? We all have the ability to do that. And we all have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's lessons to shorten our own curve to learning, which is what I commit to each of you, is to bring more of those collective elements of wisdom and lessons into your world on our rapid fire features. Until next time, be great and be you.